What's going on, everybody? My name is Mohamed. This is Heavy Metal FPL. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to take you through 9 potential picks for your FPL team. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So I'll start off with Ben White, and the main reason why I picked him is just to be a little bit different. I know everyone's talking about Saliba. A lot of people are bringing in Saliba to their team, but Ben White is another option if you want to get into the Arsenal defense. He's at 5.7 million. He got 1 goal and 1 assist so far in the Premier League, and he's got 5 clean sheets in total. He's at 53 points, which makes him the 4th best defender in the game in terms of total points. His fixtures are very good. So he's got Burnley at home next, which is a really good fixture for Arsenal, possibly the best one in FPL that you could have. Here's the thing with Arsenal, if you want to target their defense, I think the best options are either Saliba or Ben White. What you want to weigh is if you want to spend an extra 0.5 million on Ben White rather than Saliba. And the difference you would get from that is 7 points. So the total for Saliba is 46 points. Ben White is at 53 points, just 7 points extra. Is that worth 0.5 million? Or do you think that Ben White, in terms of how he plays, I know he's more attacking than Saliba, he could potentially get more involved in the Arsenal attack and potentially get you an assist, more than the likelihood of Saliba doing that. But for me, I think 0.5 million is a bit too much for that. I would rather go for Saliba. I think he's a better option, but I wouldn't fault you for going for Ben White simply because he's more involved in the Arsenal attack. So if I wanted to rank the Arsenal defenders in terms of who you would get, I would rank Saliba first, Ben White second, and third would be Gabriel. And I wouldn't go for anyone like Zinchenko or Tomiyasu because I think they're just, too likely to be rotated. I think if you have Gabriel, you keep him for these good fixtures. He might get benched in one of the games, but if you have him, I think keep him in your team and just risk that happening for 1 game week out of the next 5. I think he's likely going to start most of them. If you want to go for an Arsenal defender, Saliba's first, Ben White is second if you want to take a bit of a risk. But for me, 5.7 million is a bit too much for that. So next, I want to talk about Nketiah. I know a lot of people are bringing him in, and based on the fact that he got a hat trick against Sheffield United last game week. Here's the thing about Nketiah. I just think he's a short-term option. Like these are the facts, right? So Nketiah was not in the squad for Arsenal when they played against Sevilla in the Champions League yesterday. So he's a bit of an injury doubt. There's that first, right? So he might potentially not start against Burnley. Could he start, could he come in against Burnley and potentially score a lot of points? I think yes. I think that's definitely a possibility. But I think that's the thing that you have to bank on if you want to get him into your team, because I think he's a short-term option. Why do I think he's a short-term option? First of all, he's an injury risk. And also, Gabriel Jesus is reported to be back, and he's called up for the squad for Brazil during the international break. Now, if Gabriel Jesus is back in the Arsenal squad, then I think that gives less minutes to Nketiah. He'll likely be rotated off, and he's going to be a problem for you. So you transfer Nketiah in, and you're going to have to think about transferring out. He's going to be transferring him out later. He's going to be a problem in your team. So that's a waste of a transfer right there. So what you want to hope for is that if you get him for the Burnley fixture, which he might not start, you want him to come in and make it worth that short-term punt. So you're banking on him to come in and score 2 or 3 goals in that one fixture against Burnley, because after the international break, I think he's going to be a doubt because Gabriel Jesus is going to be coming back in. Now, this kind of gives me a segue to talk about the Arsenal attack in general. There are some doubts about them because if you watch Arsenal, they seem to be struggling a lot to break down defenses. But here's the thing, to me, I know when you watch them, they look a bit disjointed in attack, but they're still getting those results. They won 5-0 against Sheffield United, and so they broke through that. They won 2-0 against Sevilla. So their attack doesn't necessarily look that bad. They find a way, even though they struggle. But the thing is with like there's Saka, right? If he's in your team, I would definitely keep him for this fixture. But the thing is, he limped off in the last minutes of the last game, so he's a bit of an injury concern now, and he's been like that for a while because he's just playing a lot, and he limped off in the last match, so he's a little bit of a doubt. Arteta said that he's okay, but he's a bit of an injury risk to me. If I have him in my team, I would keep him. I don't want to go all out to try and get him, even though Arsenal have an amazing fixture against Burnley and they have a good run of fixtures after the international break as well. I would rather go for Saka than Nketiah because he's more of a long-term option if I do have him. But I think the Arsenal defense looks better than their attack at this point. Like their options, like Saliba, I would rather go for Saliba because he's just more nailed on, and the Arsenal defense looks more promising than their attack. Martinelli is another option for Arsenal's attack, and he's one I could potentially do because Madison is a bit of an injury concern at the moment, so I could potentially switch from Madison to Martinelli, but I want to be 100% sure on that, and I want to wait for the conference, for the press conferences from the managers, which will happen tomorrow. Nketiah, he looked like an option for me. I wanted to remove Alvarez and potentially put him in, but now that's looking less likely because I think Alvarez could potentially have a good week against Chelsea, and he's a good option in general. Removing him for someone like Nketiah seems like a bad option to me because I'm just banking on a short-term punt and a high return on that. It's a big risk for me, and I'm not very likely to go with it. In addition to that, also he's also not that consistent. If you look at his results, like in Nketiah, right? If you look at his results throughout all the games that he's played this season in the Premier League, it's just on and off basically. In some games he might score, and then in some other games which are easy fixtures, he doesn't get a return. So there's also, like, as much as there's a possibility of him just banking and hauling in this match against Burnley, there's also potential for him not to do anything, to not score at all, not him not being involved. And in addition to that, there's also Havertz. So there's an injury concern, and also Arteta might just start Havertz instead of him, which is also a concern. So not likely, like there's potential for him not to start, which makes him, I think just the downsides of having Nketiah this week outweigh the upsides. And that's why I don't want to go for him in this game week. Next, I want to talk about Jared Bowen. So Jared Bowen, I think, is the best pick for West Ham if you want to target their attack. And I think he's just the best pick for West Ham in general. He has started every single game for West Ham in the Premier League this season, 90 minutes in each one. He kind of plays in a central line position at some point, so he's a midfielder in FPL, but in real life he sometimes plays as an attacker, which is a very good plus. His away form is really, really good. Usually when West Ham have an away fixture, at least from what it looks like, he always gets points in that. Their next fixture is at home to Nottingham Forest, so not away, but still an easy fixture on paper. He's still getting the points, even though West Ham are looking bad. They've only got one win in their last 7 matches, but it doesn't really matter because all you really want to look at is the player that you have from their team. And Bowen, even when West Ham are struggling, he is getting those returns. He's in a price bracket between 7 and 8 million. There's no other midfielders in that price bracket who are as good as him. So if you've got a space in your team, the way your team is structured, you've got a gap for 78 million. I think he's the best pick at that in that price bracket. And yeah, Bowen, like, look, he's got very, very good fixtures as well. He's got Nottingham Forest next, then he's got Burnley away, then Crystal Palace at home. Tottenham away is a bit hard, but then he's got Fulham away afterwards. Bowen, I think, is a very, very good pick. He's one, if my team was structured a bit differently, I might have gone for him, but I would not fault you for having him in your team whatsoever. His numbers are good. He's got a good number of goals, 1 assist, and his fixtures are very, very good. If you want to jump in on that West Ham attack, I would not fault you at all for it, and I think Bowen is a brilliant pick for FPL this season. At a slightly lower price for West Ham, 6.5 million, is Mohamed Kudus. So he has scored 2 goals in his last 2 matches, and he also played in the EFL against Arsenal where he scored a goal over there. Against Brentford, he got 1 goal and 1 assist. And yeah, he played 90 minutes in his last 2 matches. He's looking to be a very good FPL prospect. He's kind of rising up. You might want to get him before he becomes very, very popular. Um, it's also dependent on how your team is structured. If you don't have the money for Bowen, Mohamed Kudus is another alternate option if you want to get in that West Ham attack. Scored a very, very nice goal against Brentford. You might want to check that one out. West Ham play in the Europa League. They play today, and he could potentially be starting. He's looking like a staple in that West Ham lineup, but if you want to get him, just make sure that you wait until after the Europa League fixture, just to make sure that he's not injured. Next is Mitoma. So some people might, you might be looking at targeting Mitoma because of Brighton's good fixtures, which are coming up, especially Sheffield United at home, which is coming up in game week 12 next. But so I just want to mention some facts that you might want to consider before you do that. Brighton's form has been very, very shaky lately. They've not gotten a single win in their last 5 matches. Ever since they lost 6-1 against Aston Villa, they've been looking like a shadow of themselves. They're not that free-flowing attacking team that we know them to be, and they're looking a bit different from how they started this season. So 0 wins in their last 5 matches. Mitoma's form is also not very good. He has played some hard fixtures lately. He has played against Aston Villa, as I mentioned, and also Man City and Liverpool. So there's no shame in blacking against those teams. But there was also Everton away, and there was also Fulham at home. And he only got an assist against Everton in the last match, and that was a bit fluky as well. So that's not a very good look for him. Against Sheffield United is where they could potentially bounce back, and they're a bit of a worry for me because I don't have any Brighton assets in my team, and that's a very, very easy fixture. They could potentially bounce back and maybe win 4-0, 5-0, who knows? But as of now, they're not looking very, very good. Look, he started and he's played 90 minutes in every single match since the beginning of the season, except for 1 match where he came on at halftime versus Bournemouth. And that was actually his biggest haul. He came in and he scored 2 goals and he got 14 points. If I want to get Mitoma, I think it would be short term because I think that there's a bigger pick that I want to go for later in game week 14. I'm going to get to that later. If you want to go for him, just keep in mind one thing. You want to target this fixture, there's nothing bad about that. Targeting Sheffield United at home. If you have him in your team, you definitely keep him. If you want to get him, just keep in mind that he plays against Ajax today in the Europa League. So just make sure that he doesn't get injured and not start for you. So that would be a concern. I would wait until later. Make sure he's good before you get him into your team. Next is Mbeumo. So Mbeumo is back on the menu, guys. He's looking like a very, very good pick and red hot form as of the moment. Now, I'll mention a couple of facts about Mbeumo that make him a very, very good pick for me, right? He has got the third most total points in terms of midfielders in the game at 72. The only two that are ahead of him are Son and Salah. So he's ahead of Madison in terms of points. That just shows you how good he is, right? He had a bad patch between game week 5 and 8 when they played against Newcastle, Everton, Nottingham Forest, and Man United. But then afterwards, he bounced back. He returned versus Burnley with a goal and an assist. Then against Chelsea, he got a goal and an assist. And in his last match against West Ham United, he got an assist. Red hot form. He's on penalties, right? During this season, he scored versus Tottenham. And he's also returned versus Chelsea with a goal and an assist. So it shows that he's not really immune to bad fixtures, right? So I wouldn't be very surprised if he scores against Liverpool in their upcoming game. And maybe against Arsenal as well in the game after the international break. Who knows? He might return in that as well. In game week 14, though, is where he looks like a very, very good prospect because he's got Luton at home. He's got a very good run of fixtures, right? He's got Luton at home. Then he's got Brighton away. Then he's got Sheffield United at home and then Aston Villa away. Very good run of fixtures there. That is the point, I think. Game week 14 is when I'll start really, really considering Mbeumo. I want to get him into my team for that good run of fixtures. I'm going to wait out Liverpool away and Arsenal at home, then potentially get him in my team at that point. If you have him in your team, definitely keep him because he's looking like one of the top FPL assets this season. Next is Cole Palmer. So we need to talk about him because he's just flying under the radar but doing very, very good for them. I'll mention a couple things about Cole Palmer. And look, he started since game week 7 and these are his points, right? He's got 5, then 12, then 6, then he blanked He got 2 points, then he got 12 points against Tottenham where he scored a goal and he got an assist. He's on penalties for Chelsea, and he's also one of their, like, he's a right winger for them, and he's a creative player. He could potentially get you some assists for points there. Now he's got hard fixtures. He's got Man City at home next, then he's got Newcastle away. Both very, very hard fixtures, possibly some of the hardest in the game. But then afterwards, he's got Brighton at home and then Man United away. So much easier then. For me, he looks like a very good option at game week 14 when I get Mbeumo into my team, because I'm going to need to make up the funds for him. So I'll probably sell Chang and I'll get Cole Palmer instead. So I'll have Cole Palmer and Mbeumo in my team. But Cole Palmer, I think, is the best Chelsea asset. I think he's better than Sterling, and I think he's also better than Nicholas Jackson. On penalties, creative player, 5.1 million as of now. He's 5.0 million here, but he's increased in price just as of like yesterday or before yesterday. Increased in price. Cole Palmer, very, very good. If you have him in your team, definitely keep him. And I would look at getting him in after on game week 14. Next is Gordon at 5.7 million for Newcastle. Now here's another good pick, right? Plays for Newcastle, a very, very good team, especially at home. And for him, like, as opposed to Bowen, who's nearly always good away, Gordon is almost always good at home. So he's returned in all these matches, right? He's returned against Arsenal, even though that was a bit controversial. He got returns against Crystal Palace, Burnley, Brentford, Liverpool, and Aston Villa, all at home. Against Sheffield United away, he also got 12 points in that famous big win for them earlier this season. In the Champions League, he didn't start versus Dortmund, but then he came on after 45 minutes when Callum Wilson was injured and taken off. So Callum Wilson is a bit of a doubt now, and Gordon came on in his place and played for 45 minutes in the Champions League. Newcastle have very good fixtures upcoming. Bournemouth away is very good. Chelsea and Man United both at home. They're harder than some of the rest, but they're not really bad, especially when you consider that Newcastle are forced to be reckoned with in their own stadium. Afterwards, he's got Everton away and then Tottenham away. That's a bit of a hard fixture. I think Gordon is very good to have in your team. There are some picks like around that price range that are very good, but he's one of them. If you want to go for like a bit of an alternate route in terms of like the midfielders that you want to have in your team, he's not a bad shout at all. He is most likely to start. I think he's nailed on in that Newcastle attack, and he is likely to get you returns in the upcoming matches. And finally, I want to talk about Mitchell from Crystal Palace. And this is just a way for me to talk about that Crystal Palace defense in general, because he's not the only good option. He's recently risen in price because he scored a goal in his last game against Burnley, but I think that's more of an anomaly. He also got an assist in game week 4 against Wolves, but I'm not banking on Crystal Palace defense for their goals or assists. They might get those every now and then, but it's not something I look forward to so much. I bank on that Crystal Palace defense because of how tight they are as a defensive team. So they've got clean sheets, right? I'm going to mention the teams that they got clean sheets against. There's Burnley, Nottingham Forest, Man United, Sheffield United, and Fulham, right? So potentially easy teams. I know Man United's in there, but they're not in good form, so I'm considering them kind of an easy team this season. Crystal Palace lost their clean sheets against Arsenal, Wolves, Brentford, Aston Villa, Tottenham, and Newcastle. All those you can say are hard teams, right? He got 1 and -1 in the last 2 games before in game week 9 and game week 10, 1 and -1. But that was against Newcastle and against Tottenham. There's no shame of losing your clean sheet against those 2 teams who are some of the best in the league, right? So I think Crystal Palace's defense, along with Arsenal's defense, are the ones that you should be targeting for your team based on their fixtures and based on just how good they are in defense. Mitchell has got Everton at home next, and then he's got Luton away, and then he's got West Ham away, and then Bournemouth at home. All these 4 fixtures are very good, and you could bank on them getting 2 or 3 clean sheets in any of them. If you want to switch your goalie as well, Johnstone is looking like the best goalie in FPL this season for Crystal Palace. So that's not a bad shout at all. You could go for Mitchell, 4.7 million. You could go for Guehi, also at 4.7 million. There's Anderson at 5.1 million. It's not a bad shout at all if you want to spend a bit extra. I think any of these guys are good in addition to the goalie. And that wraps it up for this video, guys. In my next video, I'm going to be talking about captaincy options. There's a lot to dissect for this week, a lot of good options. So I'll be getting into that in my next video, which will be coming up very soon. For now, if you like what I do and you like this video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'm going to be bouncing and I will talk to you all later.